So as many of you know, many of you who are here especially know, there are many difficult times in the career of a PhD student. Preparing for our qualifying exams is perhaps one of the most difficult times, at least it was for Megan and me. For us and for many, it's a dark time, very, very dark time. So in search of a break from our anxieties during preparing for our qualifying exams, one evening, Megan and I tossed aside the books and went to see a rather wonderful movie from Pixar, of course, called Ratatouille. And coming out of the movie, our first reaction reflected our self-absorbed angst going in. If we were going to take on the role of suffering artists anyways, why hadn't we just pursued careers in animation or filmmaking or the things that we had just witnessed? But the movie also inspired the opposite reaction in us, to push ahead on the paths that we had very naively chosen. There are two themes in this movie that struck us then and now give us an opportunity to reflect upon our experiences here and upon the experiences of our graduating class of 7. First, there's the movie's mantra, for those of you who have seen it: anyone can cook. In the movie, that meant even a little rat named Remy, from the country, making his way in an urban, professional, human-dominated kitchen. But although in theory anyone can cook, as we just heard, there is some food that the venture capitalist community cannot provide. And so in practice, to actually cook, and to cook well, it took an incredible amount of heart, determination, desire, and a certain amount of idiocy. And these are actually some of the same character traits that are found in doctoral students everywhere. But it's Remy's risk-taking in the face of good sense that I think really marks the doctoral students here at the School of Information. After all, we decided to join a school that for some reason has taken up the challenge of identifying, exposing, and filling in all of the important cracks and holes left open by our colleagues in the more traditional disciplines to tackle problems often ignored by industry practitioners. And this is difficult work for seasoned veterans, never mind newcomers to the craft of research. Yet this is exactly what the doctoral students of this program learn to do. So perhaps anyone can cook, and certainly anyone can earn a doctorate in information management and systems, but it's not for the faint of heart. And perhaps what it has required from all of us, above all else, is a willingness to take risks and push at the very conventions of the craft of research. So, while Remy the rat certainly challenged the status quo in many ways, what I want to say next draws inspiration from his shadowy foil, Anton Ego, a brilliant and scathing food critic. And following an incredible dinner of ratatouille prepared by Remy, Anton Ego undergoes a major transformation. The new Ego tells an audience, in many ways, the work of a critic is easy. We risk very little, yet enjoy a position over those who offer up their work and their selves to our judgment. There are times when a critic truly risks something, and that is in the discovery and the defense of the new. On the face of it, this quote may seem very out of place. After all, what else do doctoral students do if not criticize? But going beyond his actual words, what Ego was really doing here is challenging the conventions of his world of food criticism and the ways of thinking that he actually once embraced himself. And so for us, it has meant challenging the conventions in multiple worlds, the traditional academic world and the traditional builders of new technologies in the public and private sectors, both of whom often unknowingly reproduce the old under the guise of the new. Indeed, as this group of graduates, the 7 of us here, have gone out and successfully navigated difficult and very diverse job searches, we have discovered audiences seeking a particular blend of critical research and an enthusiastic willingness to engage with practitioners in the world. These are the distinguishing features of doctoral students at the School of Information. And like Anton Ego, we have done so by challenging the conventions of our fields. For example, Daniela Rosner has used some of the most cutting-edge technologies woven into fabric to document age-old practices of storytelling. She, like others in this class, show how digital media and information remain grounded in material artifacts and practices, even if deceptively so. Melissa Densmore has recently done what many know is important, but is also often impossible. She successfully published a paper that bravely documented her own failed technology intervention. And Megan Finn reminds us that the only way to discover and defend the new is to identify and understand the old, producing one of the only a few historical works produced in this future-oriented field. We also push at the conventional wisdom at every turn. And as I said before, from both from our academic and practitioner colleagues. Josh Blumenstock forces us to rethink how we frame the effects of mobile phone usage with regards to economic development. Christo Sims shows that for all the good that technology, games, and design can do to revitalize kids' educational experiences, these same kids themselves play powerful roles in how to accept, but also how to resist these progressive educational interventions. And finally, Janaki Srinivasan asked us to question what seems perhaps the most obvious. She asked us to question whether or not information truly empowers. And finally, we have pushed at the very conventions that each of us once embraced. Each of us came to this school with a particular agenda, a way of thinking about society and its information technologies that we wanted to use to make a difference in the world. I have observed that each of us graduating today sees the world very differently than we did when we started. So the message for this class, as we go forward in our careers, which take us, as the Dean said already, to prestigious universities, research labs, and professional firms, is simply this: don't stop. Whatever pressures we face from whatever sources, let us stop challenging the conventions from which these pressures build. Let us not stop, even when the conventions we end up facing down the road turn out to be those that today we now currently embrace.
So we learned a bit more from Ratatouille that night, namely that it takes other people to cook. Remy the rat needed allies, and of course, so have we. In one of my favorite academic books, the author opens up his acknowledgments by borrowing an idea from Kurt Vonnegut's wonderful book, Cat's Cradle, this idea of harass, or one's life team. So I want to take a moment at the end of Dan's wonderful speech to attempt to collectively acknowledge the life teams that have enabled the 7 of us to walk today. There are people like Peter Lyman, who for many of us made us want to be great researchers and mentored us through our first incredibly awkward research projects. There are many members of our life teams beyond the walls of South Hall. Interviewees, librarians, collaborators, and professors. Many of us are lucky enough to have many members of our class here today. So I want to say a huge thank you to friends, roommates, ex-roommates, moms, dads, brothers, sisters, cousins, grandmas, grandpas, nanas, papas, and Jing Yi Huang. I wish I could name everyone. Partners, our partners, Bankit, Roxanne, Jeff, Annie, Laura, Alex, and Ken, have been supportive through the ups and downs of dissertation writing. They've been generous readers and listeners. Their flexibility in the face of big life changes is remarkable, and we collectively thank them for joining us on an incredible intellectual adventure that would have been far less fun without them. We have a huge debt of gratitude to all the staff at the iSchool. In particular, Letty Sanchez seems to hold the school together, and it is hard to exaggerate how important she has been for anchoring many of our experiences at Berkeley. Zhang Chuang has been a primary advisor to some of us and brought a level of sympathy and generosity to the head PhD advisor role for all of us. We're grateful to everyone on this stage that sat on one of our committees. Everyone deserves thanks. And we wanted to call out 3 of the faculty members who have served on at least 4 of our committees, Jenna, Paul, and Anna. They deserve a special word. We're really grateful that when Jenna joined the iSchool, she may not have realized how much work it would be to sit on dissertation committees, and within her first year, agreed to work with many of us. She filled an intellectual void in our department with her focus on Africa and ethnographic research, for which all of us are really thankful. Paul has been a mentor to many of us, but he insists that our relationships are collaborations, which explains much of his approach to advising. Throughout colloquium and research groups, Paul has emphasized demystifying the practice of scholarship, but we still have no idea how Paul reads so fast and how he seems to have read everything several times. Ano advises many of us, and her books and teaching have inspired us. Ano has worked to build a community with a foundation of intellectual freedom, scholarly rigor, and relationships based in respect and kindness. It is hopefully clear from our dissertation titles that we have all benefited from this open and diverse environment and are thankful for her leadership. Last, quite central to many of our carasses, have been our colleagues in our various reading and research groups. Dan reminded me that when we were applying for PhD programs that I said, can I just write on my application, I want to do a PhD because I want to be good at research, which I obviously did not write, but I was definitely too naive to know was that being a good researcher meant being embedded in a great community of practice. Dan talked about the movie Ratatouille and how it was about finding allies who could help us create and be creative. I feel so lucky to have had lovely colleagues who have commented on terrible chapter drafts, worked through untold numbers of crazy ideas, listened patiently as I misinterpreted canonical texts, and struggled mightily to understand what being a PhD student meant. It's been a huge pleasure getting to know all of you. It's been the most unexpected upside of being at the iSchool. I'll be thrilled to be in each other's life teams going into the future and can't wait to see what everybody does. Thanks.